All right, I'm here with Conrad Thompson. He's the host of Something to Wrestle With, Bruce Pritchard, and What Happened When with Tony Schiavone. He's also the owner and operator of First Family Mortgage out of Huntsville, Alabama. Conrad, how you doing, man?
I'm good, dude. I appreciate you taking a little time to talk some wrestling with me today. How are you?
Oh, no, it's the pleasure's all mine, man. I'm doing really good. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot later for you, man. I'm over on the West Coast, so I appreciate you staying up late with me.
Happy to do it, man. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of catch up. What are we going to talk about today?
Well, at first I thought I'd like to introduce you to our audience. A lot of my friends, when I told them that I was going to have you on the show, they were pretty excited, and some of them didn't quite know exactly how you got started in this podcasting business, man. So how does a mortgage guy going from being just a regular wrestling fan to probably the #1 podcasting co-host in the world?
Well, I'll remove the probably. That's first, I guess. No, seriously, I just became friends with Ric Flair in 2013, and we hit it off and became fast friends, and he had an opportunity to do a podcast, and he knew that I advertised my mortgage company on the radio and television, and he thought that I could kind of do him some justice to sit in with him for one of his very first podcasts with CBS, and instead of doing a regular guest, just ask him fan questions about his career. And we did that, and it went well. And when it was all said and done, he wanted to do more of it. CBS dug it, he dug it, so we kept it going.
Yeah, I was a really big fan of that original CBS show, and then you guys ended up moving over to MLW. So whatever happened with that?
We moved to MLW and kind of owned our own show and started the Ric Flair show. And, it was just a time for us to try something new, and it worked out. We had a good time doing the Ric Flair show, and then, like all things, eventually, the new wore off, and real life got in the way. And Rick is busier than ever, so he kind of retired from podcasting.
Right.
And I picked up the slack with Tony Schiavone.
Well, there you go. And I really happen to enjoy your Tony Schiavone show. Now, Tony Schiavone, ever since he basically when Monday Nitro went off the air and WCW folded up, he kind of went into hiding a little bit. We kind of heard of him on TNA. He did a couple episodes of TNA Impact, and then I think a couple years ago he did an episode of the Ross Report with Jim Ross, and then all of a sudden, man, you guys had that big announcement on MLW, the MLW's Twitter, that you guys were doing your new podcast. How in the world did you get him to come out of hiding?
Well, if I'm honest with you, it was kind of easy. I had met him through doing a podcast with Ric Flair for CBS. I found him to be very hilarious on there and a wonderful storyteller. And, of course, he's a broadcaster in his real life, doing a lot of radio and baseball games. So when I realized that the Bruce show had gotten so successful, I thought, this is really only part of the story. We need to tell the WCW side of the story, and who could be there to kind of be my Bruce. And I wanted someone who hadn't been overexposed. Bruce was kind of one of the best-kept secrets in wrestling. So I needed someone who hadn't done 1,000 shoot interviews and been all over everything. Tony Schiavone kind of fit the bill, and he was there from 83 to 01, so you had plenty of time to cover with him, a similar number of years to what Bruce Pritchard had. So I reached out to Tony and asked for his email address, and told him that I had the pleasure of being in the crowd when he was on stage at the NWA Legends Fan Fest last year. And I realized he has fresh perspective. He hasn't been overexposed. He was there the entire time. He's a professional broadcaster. And oh, by the way, he's the Bob Saget of pro wrestling. I just made my pitch in a pretty well-written email, did I so myself, and he replied with 2 words, "I'm in."
That's so awesome. And you're absolutely right about him being the Bob Saget of pro wrestling. Some of the stories you guys are telling on that show, I have to turn really down low whenever I'm at work, and they'll catch me giggling over there on Monday mornings at my cubicle.
Well, I appreciate that, man. It was kind of a happy accident. Never intended on the show, having that sort of sense of humor or personality. But it is the real Tony Schiavone. It was organic, and it just fit.
Right. I feel like we're actually getting to know him because for the longest time he was more of a professional, clean cut, white meat, baby face talking head on Monday Nitro, and now you're getting to see the real Tony, and I think you guys are hitting a home run with that show, as well as the Bruce Pritchard show. Now Bruce wasn't exactly in hiding; he'd been doing some episodes, but that is my must listen to each and every Friday. You guys knock it out of the park each week. It's a mandatory listening for me. So I got a couple of questions about the Bruce Pritchard show, and then we'll kind of transition on to some more regular wrestling talk. So, which episode got you the most heat from the WWE offices?
Well, I don't know that we necessarily got any heat specifically. We've had several episodes that warranted a phone call, and even more when I would see guys in person, they would want to kind of talk my ear off about it. But the only one that we were a little nervous about was the Sunny episode because it kind of caught us by surprise how big our audience had become and what type of power the podcast had. Where some of the content we covered on that show was the talk of television tape that week for the WWE, and we didn't hear that just once; we heard it multiple times, and that's when we realized, hey man, people are paying attention. We've got a little bit of influence here, and we're not saying from a braggadocious way. We just need to be careful and at least mindful with the way we use it. So we have tried to go into those conversations and those sort of sensitive topics with the end in mind about who all might be affected with this 20 years later.
Right. I was going to ask you about that episode specifically, and if you had to do it all over again, do you think that maybe you would have kind of not gone so in depth with some of the more let's say interesting and darker stories, specifically surrounding Shawn Michaels? Do you think that you would have probably tried to stay away from that a little bit more?
Without question, the biggest regret I have doing the podcast is telling the lipstick story. And that wasn't a story that either one of us had ever heard before. We were literally reading it right from our book. And at the time, I felt like that kind of absolved me of any sort of responsibility. But that's short-sighted, and it's not fair because you're talking about a guy who had been married at that point for 20 years, who had two, high school-age children. He's in a different spot, and I didn't really consider that. I considered, how crazy it was that he would share this information. But what I didn't really put together until that show aired was that, and I'm not saying this to be ugly, how many people bought that book at that point? 2,000, 3,000 people. Meanwhile, 600,000 people heard the podcast.
Right.
So, totally different deal. So you could say, well, she's awful for writing it. Well, she told 2,000 people, and we told 600. It's a different deal.
Yeah, I never read that book. I had no interest in it, and so when you guys told those stories, that was the first time I was hearing it, and I was kind of uncomfortable as well. But it turned out to be probably one of your better episodes. Now, one of the latest episodes you guys have done on Vince Russo has been the talk of Twitter, to say the least. Now, Vince has come out here recently and said that he was able to give you guys a call and smooth things over. So how is that relationship right now?
Oh, everything's fine. We're good. Vince Russo and I have never been crossed ever. I know that he and Bruce had a little bit of a situation a few years ago, but as far as I know, all of that has been squared away. And as we talk to you now, in late June, everything's fine.
Right, and I'm not trying to get you into trouble here, and but I got to ask you since it's in the news now. Vince Russo had filed an emergency protection order against Jim Cornette, which it kind of sounds pretty silly and ridiculous. And it was been the talk of social media over the last week. Jim Cornette has cut a show on it. Vince Russo just did another podcast about why he did it. What are your thoughts on the whole situation?
Well, my initial thought was it's wrestling, so it's a work. Everything in wrestling is a work, and they wanted to take this, kind of quote-unquote blood feud to another level and some more attention, so mission accomplished. Well, now that we've had a little bit of time to let some of that digest, maybe it's not the work that I thought it was. However, I can't say that I would call it stupid of Russo given some of the comments that have been said over the years, in public and in private, it's not a bad idea if you're really concerned about your wife to go ahead and just get one extra layer of protection. I like to think in terms of worst case scenario. Well, what's the worst thing that could happen? The worst thing that could happen would be Cornette shows up and you're not home, and he, doesn't behave himself as well as maybe you'd like. Is that unlikely? Absolutely. Is it maybe even a little ridiculous to even consider? Absolutely. But is it something that you can give yourself peace of mind for a little bit of paperwork? Absolutely. So from that standpoint, I kind of understand it, but the realistic side of me says, dude, this is all a waste of time. Nothing was ever going to happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing is kind of. It seems really silly, but the fact that he did it was pretty entertaining to say the least. Jim Cornette's rebuttal to what the emergency protection order was pretty awesome. So, at the very least, we got some entertainment value out of the whole thing. So let's go ahead and transition away from from your podcasting, and let's go ahead and talk some wrestling. What are your thoughts about the upcoming Great Balls of Fire pay-per-view and the main event of Samoa Joe and Brock Lesnar? Where do you see them going with that? Because I'm kind of scared that they're going to do what they did with Randy Orton at SummerSlam last year and kind of squash, Samoa Joe in less than 5 minutes and bloody him up. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Lesnar retains, but I'm not scared for it. I don't think this is going to be the dream match that a lot of people want it to be. I think sometimes dream matches need to stay dream matches for a reason. I think that Lesnar really works a better style with a smaller opponent, and I think you could say the same thing about Samoa Joe. Some of Samoa Joe's most well-reviewed matches are against guys who were, Austin Aries or Loki or Christopher Daniels size. Very rarely do you see him paired up with a super heavyweight and it becoming a match that everybody is raving about. That doesn't mean that he couldn't do that. Of course he could, but it doesn't seem that has happened with any sort of regularity. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at on it. I think it'll be a fun match, but I don't think it's going to be this all-time Matt Classic 10-star main event people want it to be.
Right, so you're not thinking it's going to get 6.5 stars, right?
Well, I don't think they're wrestling in the Tokyo. So,
no.
And we have a lot of fun with that on Bruce's show, but I'm a big fan of Dave Meltzer and everything that he does, and I'm certainly a big fan of these action figures and little standees and things like that they're producing. Yes, some of it's silly, but if people are having fun with it, what's the harm in that?
Right. I mean, it gives us stuff to talk about, so I love the fact that he rates the matches the way he does, and I love the fact that people get pissed off about it. We're wrestling fans. That's what we're supposed to do.
I totally agree.
Right. So since we went ahead and brought up the Tokyo Dome, now matches in Japan, we'll go ahead and kind of tease Dave Meltzer here a little bit. Matches in Japan usually start off at about 3 stars for even their opening match because they're in Japan. But this coming up Saturday, New Japan is in Long Beach, California. Now, how many stars do they get taken away for the fact that they're in the United States?
I'm sorry, you broke up on me. Can you say that again?
Well, so I said, so New Japan, their shows in Japan at the Tokyo Dome or at the Budokan, their matches, their worst matches, usually start off at around 3 stars. Now, how many stars get taken away for their show coming up this Saturday, which happens to be in Long Beach, California?
Well, if Dave is there, it'll be rated a lot better.
Right.
Dave once gave a house show match between Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair 10.5 stars. So if Meltzer's there, it's automatically a star or 2 better.
Right. So what are your thoughts on the New Japan product? I hear you talk a lot about WWE and what they got going on. You were on MLW radio at one point, and you didn't seem to be like you're the biggest fan of New Japan, but what are your thoughts on New Japan, and will you be watching this weekend?
I'm not a huge New Japan fan. I do check it out, but most of the time when I'm checking it out, it's stuff that's got a little bit of age on it, and it's airing on the Access Network. I think that Jim Ross and Josh Barnett do a job with it, and overall, I'm pretty pleased with their performance as well. So, can't say anything bad about New Japan.
Right, and so their show's coming up this Saturday, and Cody Rhodes, who you know Cody Rhodes, right? He's a friend of yours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what do you think about Cody Rhodes' progression since he's left the WWE? He's totally put that Stardust character behind him. He's really made a real big name for himself on the indie scene and Ring of Honor, New Japan. What are your thoughts on what he's been able to do this last year?
Well, I guess I should clarify. I am friendly with Cody Rhodes, but we're not like BFFs or anything. I have great respect for his family. I've done some business with his brother. Obviously we had him on the Ric Flair show, and I think he listens to the Bruce Pritchard podcast. So, I'm very friendly with him, but we're not BFFs. But I am certainly very proud of his accomplishment to become a world champion. It's a big deal, and I think a lot of people sleep on that belt a little bit more than they should. In terms of prestige, to me, it's still the WWE title. We've most recently seen the modern-day Maharaja possess. I think that's still the number one title in the business. I think you could argue that the New Japan World title is number 2. And then for my worldview, Ring of Honor is number 3. And Impact and everybody else, round out the top 5. But to me, the Ring of Honor belt still means something. And for Cody to have an opportunity to carry that belt, which is the same belt that, really, really phenomenal wrestlers held, whether it was CM Punk or Daniel Bryan or Seth Rollins or Kevin Owens, the best of the best have held this. And for him to have that opportunity now, I consider to be a great honor.
Yeah, Cody Rhodes is absolutely great. He actually had come up here a couple of months ago and did a show here in Northern California for APW. He's actually coming back next Friday night. I will be there for APW in Pacifica, California, and he hopefully will be defending both titles. We'll see how likely that is after this weekend. He's going to be going for the IWGP Championship against Okada, title for title. So I'm pretty excited about that. Now, you had mentioned Ring of Honor. How much of Ring of Honor are you watching these days?
Well, I still catch all the pay-per-views, but I don't catch the regular TV show. I don't get it in my area. Sinclair does not service Huntsville, Alabama. So if there's something posted online, I usually try to catch it, and I catch all the pay-per-views. So I keep up as much as I can. I've been to several Ring of Honor tapings. I first fell in love with Ring of Honor back in 2004, and we've had an on-again, off-again love affair ever since.
Right. I think the fact that you can't watch that TV show on a regular basis really holds Ring of Honor back, and they're on such a big platform with Sinclair Broadcasting, and now that they've taken over Tribune Media and they have WGN at their disposal, what is the likelihood that Ring of Honor ends up on the WGN station or a station like it?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think if they could just uniform start time across all their markets, they'd pick up a lot of momentum. Bruce Pritchard has shared the story that once upon a time, WrestleMania was marketed starting at the same time everywhere. So I forget exactly the time, but let's just freestyle that it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, the show would air at 1 o'clock Eastern, but then they would air it at 1 o'clock on a 1-hour tape delay Central, and do the same for Mountain, but with 2 hours, and then do the same with Pacific, but with 3 hours. And that uniformity, even on the closed circuit market, really allowed for a clear, concise marketing and branding message and opportunity. And even if you couldn't say WGN, Ring of Honor, Sundays at 8, if you could just say catch Ring of Honor every Thursday at 10 or whatever it is, offering that consistent time would make a huge difference, in my opinion.
I totally agree. I've watched maybe a handful of their television shows, but I have caught a lot of their pay-per-views, and it's just they make it really inconvenient to be a fan of theirs, unfortunately, because the wrestling is so good. A lot of times they're probably the best 1-hour show on TV each week, with the exception to New Japan Pro Wrestling on Access. And it really seems like WWE has kind of oversaturated the market. They got 3 hours on Monday, 2 hours on Tuesday, or 3 hours on Tuesday with 205 Live. They got an hour on Wednesday. How much wrestling can a average fan actually digest each and every week?
Man, I think 3 hours is too. In a perfect world, 2 hours of Raw and an hour of SmackDown would be phenomenal. But that's just unrealistic, and especially if you're going to try to keep up with everything else. If you want to do an hour of New Japan, an hour of Ring of Honor, and as you said, all the other offshoots, Talking Smack, the new specials that come out, a pay-per-view, NXT, if there is some sort of tournament like the Cruiserweights or the women, and then just your regular Raw and SmackDown, it's a lot. That's before you ever get into any of the retro stuff on the network. So, to me, I think we're in the DVR generation, and I do think it is a kind of a la carte opportunity for most wrestling fans. I think if you can't be happy right now as a wrestling fan, you should find another hobby, because there is so much choice out there. No one is forcing you to watch any of it. You're not getting your arm twisted to pick one or the other. You can literally watch whatever you want, and there's so much content out there that you can just, kind of pick your spots, and that's what I find myself doing. If there's a hot angle for Ring of Honor that everybody's buzzing about, I'm going to go out of my way to find it. If there's a 6 1/4 match in New Japan, I'm going to go out of my way to find it. And then as far as Raw and SmackDown goes, I can kind of record those and just fast forward them to kind of pick my spots. And on the network, well, that goes without saying, you can just kind of bounce around and find exactly what you're looking for.
Awesome. Yeah, there's so much content. If you're a real wrestling fan, you don't really have anything to complain about. My biggest problem being a wrestling fan is that there's so much for me to watch. And as a married guy with a full-time job, it's hard for me to digest a lot of it. So I get to make up for some of that stuff by just playing podcasts at my job. And I get to catch up on stuff like that, and I'll go watch whatever I need to. So it's really convenient being a wrestling fan these days.
Yeah, especially when you consider the access we have to the performers through the miracle of social media. You and I actually lined up this podcast today through social media, and it goes to show you just how the world is becoming more and more connected just based on the relationships we build through the internet. And I think that's definitely where the money is long term in professional wrestling. Less and less about TV or pay-per-view, more and more about how you can manipulate this broadband internet to become your personal ATM.
Absolutely. And for all the people that were asking me how I was able to land Conrad on the show, well, I asked him, and he said yes. It was just like that. All I had to do was email him, and he said, absolutely, let's do it. So I really appreciate you coming on here. I don't want to keep you forever, so let me go ahead and fire off some questions that some of the folks on Twitter have sent over to me. So you and I are about the same age. I'm 34 years old. So we pretty much grew up in the Monday Night War era. Were you a WCW guy or a WWE guy?
Well, it really depends, I guess, on what was going on at the time. I would always watch both shows, and I would record both shows, and I'd kind of bounce back and forth. But if I had to pick one at the time, I certainly would have picked the WWF. Now, when I go back, I find that most of that stuff doesn't age as well, and I would probably be more of a WCW fan today.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I know that whenever I was 14 years old, all the stuff that they were doing was really cool. But now when I try to go back and watch some of the Attitude Era stuff, I kind of cringe just watching a lot of those things. And I find it easier to digest what WCW was putting out those days, especially, being an older married guy that I am right now.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree at all.
Right. And so I take it you were also an ECW fan. What were who were some of your favorite ECW wrestlers back in the 90s?
Well, that's kind of a tough question to ask. I think what I enjoyed most about ECW was the feeling that you were a part of something that was underground, that was cool, that was edgy, that was ahead of its time, and it almost was positioned as if it was, this own little clique within a clique, this own little band of bandits. The island of the misfit toys, if you will, and I think that's what made it cool. Is everybody wants to be the person who discovers the new hot restaurant in town and tell everybody about it. And everybody wants to be the guy who has, a band CD before they blow up. And so a lot of their songs may appear on their first commercial release, but you've got the original with that hard to find artwork, and that type of stuff is cool. And I feel like that's what ECW presented itself as most of all. We're a niche company. Yes, we're different than them, but we're more passionate about it, and I think that's what I really enjoyed. But certainly the Raven character was phenomenal. The Sandman character was outstanding. I loved Taz. I thought Sabu and Van Dam were phenomenal. Once upon a time, I bought into the hype and thought the Eliminators were one of, if not the best tag team in the world. And of course, that's not true. It wound up being the Dudley Boys. Nobody saw that coming, but it happened. And I don't know that there was a more ECW style character than New Jack. To me, New Jack was the epitome of ECW. He could cut a promo. He had a cool look, and his entrance, was really unique and special. And of course, he brought a trash can full of weapons to the ring. I don't know how you get more unique than that.
Right, when he came out to Natural Born Killers by Ice Cube and Tupac, and a white boy from the hood like me was a really big fan of those guys back in the 90s. So I always was a really big fan of New Jack. Okay, so I got some fun questions for you before I let you get back to doing whatever you're doing. Okay, so if you, Tony, and Bruce were out in the middle of the ocean on a boat and it's about to sink, and one of you has to get off, which guy are you saving? Is it going to be Tony or Bruce?
I'm saving Bruce because 4 million people a month listen to Bruce, and I'm going to make a lot more money with Bruce. So I'll push Tony's head under the water, but first I will see if I can get a cell phone signal, and I'll show him bikini shots of Medusa and Deborah, so he'll die happy.
That's awesome. Okay, and is Jim Cornette into vampires?
I've never seen him watch a vampire movie or stab anyone in the heart with a stake.
Well, I asked that because during the Jim Cornette episode on your show, he had to leave a party because his girlfriend smelled garlic. I just thought that was interesting, and you guys didn't really elaborate on that.
Well, throw it in your Google machine. I'm not trying to be dismissive. Jim Cornette is a friend of Bruce Pritchard's. He's always been very polite to me. I would consider myself to be friendly with him. But a simple Google search can help you with some of those questions that I probably shouldn't answer.
Right. And last one. And so I'm going to turn the tables on you this time. A lot of times on the Bruce Pritchard show, you happen to ask how much people are getting paid, how much he was getting paid, certain wrestlers getting paid. So, Conrad, how much scratch you getting from his podcast, huh?
Millions of dollars.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I'm independently wealthy because of podcasts now. A lot of these guys are out here doing their podcasts and making peanuts, and that's not what we do. We're the big baller brand of podcasting at this point. Well, I'll tell you this. We're probably the third most profitable wrestling company in the United States. How's that?
I like it, man. I like it. Well, Conrad, I really appreciate you doing the show, man. I think that we're going to go from 60 followers to a hell of a lot more followers than what we have right now, and it's all because of you, brother. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, man, sorry I was a little late getting together. We just finished taping the CM Punk episode. I hope everybody digs that. It's going to drop this Friday at noon, and then next Friday we're bringing In Your House Canadian Stampede. And then right in the middle, this coming Monday, we're going to cover the 1996 Bash at the Beach, where Hulk Hogan turned heel, a really iconic moment in the history of the sport. The story of CM Punk is a little bit of what might have been and what nearly wasn't. And then, of course, Canadian Stampede, maybe the hottest crowd in WWE history. It's going to be a fun couple of shows. Check them all out at MLWRadio.com. I'm on Twitter at Hey It's Conrad, and I'd love to help you save some money on your mortgage. And you'll be glad that you went to SaveWithBruce.com. Bruce Pritchard and I are helping families all across the nation buy houses with no money down. refinance to get rid of all their debt, and most importantly, get out of debt faster. So whether you've got a second mortgage, you've got credit card debt, or maybe worst of all, if you're stuck in a 30-year loan, jump out in front of that, get a better deal, go to savewithbruce.com.
Awesome, Conrad. Thank you very much.
Hey, man, thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yep, no problem. Talk to you later, man.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.